Hey, what is going on, guys? Thanks for tuning in to the SMT YouTube channel. Glad you guys could make it here today for this edition. And we're going to be talking the T-Mobile and Sprint merger. This is trial day number 6. Got all the details for you here, all the things that happened in terms of the testimony and all the questions that the judge was asking of those on trial. All right, so let's get things started first. If you appreciate these daily updates and appreciate what's going on with the channel and getting all the information in a timely fashion, please go ahead and hit that like button. And if you haven't done so already, hit that subscribe, as well as that notification bell so you never miss an upload from the SMT. Anyways, so a bit of a continuation from last week, day 5, which was on Friday. Today, it continued with a little bit from Neville Ray. And then as things kind of progressed, they moved over to the Sprint side. So it looks like there's a bit of a scheduling conundrum. I don't know. They're trying to get to certain individuals, and it just seems like stuff's all over the place. Anyways, we got testimony from Neville. We got testimony from Mike Sievert, I believe, a little bit. The VP of Network Technology from T-Mobile, Ankur Kapoor. A lot of action from the T-Mobile side early, and then they transitioned over to the Sprint side with Marcelo, who's the former CEO of Sprint, and also Michael Combs, who's the current CEO of Sprint. And they were supposed to get to Charlie Ergen from Dish. That didn't end up happening, so we'll talk more about that later. Anyways, in terms of Judge Marrero, it doesn't feel like he's very happy with the situation. He's not thrilled with the progression of the trial. He seems to be quite frustrated and annoyed in a way. I'm getting a sense of that. That's just conjecture. It's not something that he's officially saying like I'm aggravated or whatever. But it seems that way. Maybe he's a little testy. He's not a fan of certain things that are being said or going on. But anyways, in terms of the testimony from former Sprint CEO Marcelo Clore, this was the big one. Basically, Clore, he just basically was saying that he's been trying to save Sprint from bankruptcy. They're not able to sustain long-term. The turnaround plan will not work, what they have in place. In my opinion, he's just confirming that he's an absolute failure. He hasn't been able to secure the company's future. He's basically has admitted incompetence. Nothing effectively showing business contributions. I'm going to do a separate video on Marcelo personally, but again, it's not all his fault, but I do want to make sure that people understand he was the CEO for 4 years. During all of these types of merger talks, there's no more funding from SoftBank, apparently. There are no returns. So SoftBank is basically saying, well, you guys can't money. There's no hope of making money, so we're not investing into it. The Dish merger talks from back in 2017, Marcelo spoke to them saying that there's no new synergies involved with that transaction. We wouldn't be gaining new customers, and we would be taking on a combined debt of over $48 billion. So they thought that that was not a viable option. Cable operations, he was talking about Comcast, how they detest the merger because it brings them competition. I actually agree with Marcelo. Not many things I agree with him about, but that's one of them. Network-wise, apparently, he disclosed that Sprint has been losing $5 billion annually beginning in 2014. He essentially admitted to being a regional carrier. They have been trying to actively avoid paying rent on certain towers, focusing on the markets that they have that are actually good, and they don't have the low-band assets to compete. They simply have been relying on mid-band, which is no way to get a network covered in a place like the United States. $10 billion in layoffs. Sprint had to go back to T-Mobile, and they had to swallow their pride, essentially. He's disclosing all of this. He mentioned and spoke about Dish trying to avoid trouble with the FCC, and that they could only offer a thin network in terms of infrastructure. Sprint lost out on the Comcast deal and the Charter deal, as those MVNO deals went to Verizon. But apparently he disclosed that that was never even truly really an option, and that basically Verizon was going to be Comcast and Charter's initial pick. They just used Sprint as leverage to say, give us your cheapest price that you can offer, and we're going to use this to leverage Verizon. In an email from Masa to Clore, it was an email or a WhatsApp message. I think it was an email. Masa was ready to pay the debt if the merger requires it. So it looks like Masa was ready to just go all in with this merger, no matter what it took, as long as it happened. Some other things to note. The judge asked Marcelo if T-Mobile can turn around, why can't Sprint? This was a big thing. And he basically said Spectrum. He said a future for Sprint really just seems to be a regional carrier with pockets of 5G, and they'd end up borrowing money and probably accruing more debt. And in 2014 to 2018, he said we made some gains, but we faded, and that Verizon and AT&T will win guaranteed in 5G without the merger. So that was, the bleak story that he wanted to emphasize. But the bottom line is Marcelo is basically saying, I did what I could. Michael Combs is saying, I did what I could. We tried to prevent increasing of debt. We tried to make the company viable, and we've been unable to do so long term. Everything we've been doing has been to stop the bleeding, and in my opinion, they haven't stopped any bleeding. They've been hemorrhaging customers for years, and their market share has steadily decreased. So actually, I think it's even worse than they try to let on. They're more responsible and culpable than they think they are. But again, like I said, the tone of the judge on Clary's testimony, he seemed aggravated, frustrated at times, saying just answer the questions. That happened a couple times with Combs as well as Marcelo. The MVNO deal questions were kind of interesting. A couple of Charlie Ergen mentions came up with Dish and the failed merger talks between them. And he said that, what happened with T-Mobile, what happened with Dish, in those merger talks. He basically said, Marcelo, he said, we just have to move on. And we got to do it standalone. In other words, what was being offered and negotiated wasn't good enough to help them recover or become a viable business moving forward. So that was the emphasis today. Again, I don't take much stock in it other than obviously the judge wants to see if Sprint has truly exhausted all their business opportunities. And it looks like they have actively tried. They're just incapable of doing so. And their problems in the past and investment failures and issues with debt and poor purchases. Dish has done the same thing. There's just a lot of this going on. But one thing that is true, and Marcelo said it, he said Verizon and AT&T would win. That is a 100% guarantee. T-Mobile nor Sprint has the correct spectrum assets singularly to actually compete with Verizon and AT&T. AT&T has the most expansive portfolio of spectrum holdings. They will clearly put themselves in a position to win, especially with Band 14 and their government contract there with the FirstNet, and Verizon with dynamic spectrum sharing, as well as just having the upper hand in market share and spending. They're just able to do it. T-Mobile doesn't have the mid-band. T-Mobile doesn't have what it's going to be taking to provide the capacity. They're already struggling with congestion in certain markets, and Sprint doesn't have the low band. So they really do need each other if they are going to truly compete on a network side. I don't want to get into this anti-competitive, blah, blah, blah. It's not about that. We're talking about the network right now, and I think Marcelo was correct about that, and I think T-Mobile's also correct when they admit that. On the network side, they cannot compete with Verizon and AT&T. And of course, if anybody really wants to do anything, we need to hold these AGs accountable. They have yet to truly question or investigate what's going on with Dish, but we'll see. Tomorrow we should have some testimony. If not tomorrow, maybe the next day. But things should be wrapping up at some point this week or next week. I don't know. It's kind of up in the air when things are going to close and what that's going to look like. But again, that's what we currently have. That's the summary, and those are some of the items from today's testimony. Again, if you like this video, please do like and share it. Share it to your favorite social media outlets, your different platforms, Twitter, Instagram, or whatever. Share it for me. That would be great. Help the channel grow. And check out the description box. We got tons of different links there for the different communities, the podcast, all types of goodies there, the Twitter handle, all that. So check those things out, and hopefully you guys enjoyed this video, and we'll see you guys on the next one. I'm the SMT, and we'll see you guys for tomorrow's summary of the trial hearings. Day 7 coming up tomorrow. We'll see you guys on the next one. Peace.